The third one is loud. Nicole, thank you for getting the door. It's some days it's a little bit tough to hear because we're prime real estate for groups that like to meet, but it's also always very interesting because you get to get a little flavor about what's going on in the building. So I want to get us started first by welcoming, we have Representative Haskins in for Representative Wynn today, and also acknowledge that, yeah, we only for kids, this is Representative Hubert. So, okay, we're going to get refocused here. And if I was still in the classroom, I'd say all eyes, never mind. We're adults. I also wanted to thank Representative Wagner and Representative Ballard for substituting yesterday. I apologize if I left anybody out. The minutes have been circulated to you, and a motion to approve as presented is in order. Representative Brantley and a second from Representative McNorton. Are there any corrections or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed, same sign. And the motion carries, along with a huge thank you to our fantastic committee assistant for having us up to date. Those were yesterday's minutes we just approved, and I love that. Gabby, I mentioned to you that we'd like to ask you a question, if you don't mind coming forward. I think Dr. Harwood is in Senate Ed today. So we'll say that we got half of the team, and we'll let the decision of who's the better half up to the audience. And there was a question that came up in the cell phone bill that we heard today, and the list of accrediting agencies was frozen. But somebody wanted to know the total number of schools that, no matter who they're accredited by and so on, exist. And I'd like you to explain for our viewing audience what that looks like.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Frank and I realize we're really bad about doing this. My name's Gabrielle Hull. I'm the legislative coordinator for KSDE. We, as the department, maintain two lists of schools. One will be the schools that are accredited by the State Board of Education. To us, that's what accreditation means. The other list will be qualified schools that would like to participate in the tax credit scholarship. So for that purpose, they would have accreditation from a approved accrediting body just for the purposes of participating in that program. The other list that we maintain is any non-accredited private school, according to statute, has to register that they exist. Really, the things they're required to provide to the state is the name of their school and where they are. You'll have to forgive my use of props. We have a document on our website. This is what they fill out. It will have their address and their name and whether they're new or if they want to update anything. So for that purpose, if they are accredited by an agency that is regional or national, we would not know. We don't ask that information, and it's not required in statute. And for our purposes, anyone that has that accreditation would have the same status as a homeschool as non-accredited in the state of Kansas. So we cannot differentiate the list of schools that are working with any regional or national organizations and how many there might be out there.
Thank you, Gabby. Any questions for Gabby? Yes, Representative Haskins.
Sorry, committee, I didn't know I was going to start off. Thank you, Madam Chair, but I was wondering that exact question because I was looking at KSDE and there is a list of approved accredited agencies, but that's for a law that states that it's to identify if they taught at these accredited agencies, the mentoring portion would satisfy their initial license.
Yes.
Now, is that the list we're talking about as far as recognized accredited agencies? Or is it a different institution? Because the law is specific to mentoring. I was just curious.
Yeah, so that list that you're mentioning is posted on our website. For educators that want to move from their initial license to their professional license, they are required to have a certain amount of experience. So for that purpose, that list is if they've taught at a school that has accreditation from one of those entities, they would qualify as having met that requirement of educating with an accreditation. That list, I think, has come up in regards to the cell phone bill, but that is for a specific requirement related to licensure.
And Madam Chair, one last question. Are there any schools that are currently accredited that would meet the requirements according to House Bill 2299? That was ultimately what I was trying to find today.
We would know of the ones that are accredited by the State Board of Education that are non-public schools.
So the answer to your question is yes, but they don't track it, okay? And it's an interesting origin of that list because it actually comes from the Department of Homeland Security and for the J-1 visa, so for international students. But we use it that way, and we also use it for the tax credit. So when somebody is asking for a tax credit or they're asking to be part of KSHA, because those schools qualify for that as well, that's when they're asked, are you accredited? And you would say, I'm accredited by such and such organization. So just wanted to clear that up. And thank you, Gabby, for helping to clarify that for us. We were going to do our informational hearing first, but I see that Senator Starnes is here, and I bet he needs to get back to education. So we will do our bill hearing first. Jason, would you like to explain 361 for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 361 amends one statute. It is the open enrollment statute 72-3123. Under current law, subsection D of the statute sets out priorities for enrollment of non-resident students and provides some exemptions from the open seat lottery process. That's the process that's used if the public school district does not have enough capacity to accommodate all of the non-resident students who choose to enroll in the district. Senate Bill 361 creates another exemption from that open seat lottery process, and this would be for foreign exchange students who reside with the family who is in the district, resides in the district. So if the foreign exchange student comes in, wants to enroll in the resident school district for the host family that they're living with, then they would be permitted to enroll with the school district and would not be subject as a non-resident student to any open seat lottery. The bill passed the Senate on a vote of 38-0 and would go into effect on July 1st if enacted. Happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you, Jason, very much. And we will move to proponent testimony. And Senator Starnes, you may get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. Senator Brad Starnes, 22nd District, which is all of Riley County. So Manhattan, K-State, MATC, MCC, all under my boundaries. Thank you for the opportunity. Jason did a good job explaining the particulars of it. Our situation and those that I represent, they have a pretty transient population with the fort being close, as well as the college professors or other employees moving in and out. So long story short, as no fault of the superintendent, he's trying to keep open seats for in-district students and then have a situation where he may have to turn away some people, particularly it would be a possibility of the foreign exchange students because of the fact that they aren't having a seat provided for them. And so this bill would just allow them to have that seat just as a, quote, resident student would in the truest sense. The other thing that happens is it's required to be completed by July 15th each year, what they have to turn in, the superintendents, to the state. And districts must publish the number of open seats available by June 1st. So the host families may not have completed all of the paperwork or have the student there prior to these dates. So then they would be put to the open seat lottery process, which they may or may not be allowed to have a seat. So it's just a common sense type of thing. I think it's important that the opportunities as we all understand with foreign exchange students, what a great opportunity that is for not only the students, but those students and families that are associated with them and what all they can provide. So anything we can do to help make that easier, make it more available for them, I think is a positive step. So ask you to please consider it for passage, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Representative Chauncey.
Yeah, just real quick for clarification, on foreign exchange students, are we taking a slot allocated for students enrollment in the district, or are we just adding an additional slot? Is that what this bill is trying to do?
Yes, and yes. It's allowing for the resident student. So it's either way you want to choose it. So some superintendent may say, well, hey, they're, quote, not a resident student because they don't have an address necessarily. Others would say, hey, they're treated as a resident student. KSDE, I believe, and I don't want to speak for them, sees them as resident students as well. But if they aren't recognized by that, then they would be granted a spot through the open enrollment process.
You're welcome. Representative Hubert and then Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How does this get impacted? I had an exchange student stay with us about 20 plus years ago. It wasn't a full year program. If you're like coming over for 6 weeks, are they able to plug in with the current circumstances, or would they impact a slot if they're just not a full year student?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not for sure. I would assume they would be under the same type of open enrollment piece, that we've started school, there's room for to take this student for 6 weeks, whatever the visit may be, in a similar situation as we have some come in and out of district with military and those type of things. So, you bet.
Representative Boatman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Could you please clarify what the current, like for a student, a foreign exchange student right now, could you explain, I guess, what the current mechanisms are and I guess what problem this bill solves?
Yeah, and thank you for your question. And Madam Chair, the situation is the students, again, may be caught in the middle of the situation that I, as a superintendent in this class of 22, I'm holding 16 seats for my resident students. And so how do I declare that foreign exchange student? Are they a resident or not? And they fit into that number, and or if they're non-residents, how many do I accept of that? Are they a non-resident? What this does is get rid of that, and they would be allowed a spot to take in. So I think it helps solve some issues for superintendents and those being involved with the program, that they know I can accept this child and know that they're going to get into our schools.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Representative Chauncey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, does the school are they not aware that the foreign exchange students are coming prior to the school year? I mean, I know it's prior to, after the deadline they could be, but do they not have to make the arrangements for that student to get here and be part of the school district, even though they don't have an address for that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you, Madam Chair. And so the situation is you may or may not have the paperwork all completed by these June dates. And so this alleviates that problem, because I haven't actually hosted, but the host families say there's a situation with the dates that then create issues for them, because they're going through all the paperwork to get them. The student may be there, but the paperwork may be behind them. And so help alleviate that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Senator, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for your time.
Our pleasure. And then we get to welcome retired Senator Tom Hawk to be with us today. Welcome to committee.
Hey, that is a nice thing. I was looking for a parking spot in the garage. You wouldn't know one, Representative Schreiber, would you? Madam Chair, there are lots of things I miss, but my parking spot in the garage is the thing I miss the very most on the days I get to come testify. So Chair Estes, Vice Chair McNorton, Ranking Member Stajil, and committee members, several of you who I have had a chance to serve with, either in the House or Senate. And so those are great memories, and I certainly miss that. It really is my honor to provide testimony for Senate Bill 361. I think Senator Starnes did a very good job of laying out what the issue is. And being a senator where I had my own mic, unlike the House members who have to go to the well, we were really crisp when we got into the Senate, and then it ruined us, and we all talked too much, and I'm no exception. So I apologize for that. But at any rate, what this does is really correct what is an unintended consequence of that open enrollment bill. And it's particularly an interesting problem for a growing district like Manhattan, and it's nice to be growing. We also closed out our ninth grade center, added space at the high school and moved the ninth graders to the high school. So we're very tight on enrollment. And so this bill probably addresses Manhattan more than most districts right now, but I think other districts will have similar problems as we go through the years. And I did talk to Brenda Dietrich because she was a superintendent, as I was in Manhattan. Actually, she was at Auburn-Washburn. But she said that bill was never intended to speak to foreign exchange students. They're really in-district students. They stay in the host family. They're in-district students, not unlike, I got to be careful if my wife's listening, if our grandkids came to live with us, which I hope they don't, but if they did, they would be an in-district student. And so that's what these students are. And the dilemma in the background, the superintendent wanted to comply. He wants to comply with all rules, regs, laws that the legislature puts down. But he felt like he was in a really difficult position when we talked about this open enrollment law. And he said, and I'm not sure if the date's May 1 or June 1, but the statute that I have said May 1, but he said, I don't know if I'm going to have room for those. And the AFS people have a form called the Placement Acceptance Form that has to be filled out. That's a requirement. The State Department requires that. And that form, you say, I'm going to have spot for them. But he said, they're not an in-district student on May 1st. Most of them don't get here till July, when school starts in August. And some of them, as Senator Starnes said, may come in August. So that was a problem. He felt like if I sign that form, then I may be telling on open enrollment, and we're next to Fort Riley, a military base, they have priority, and they also have priority for siblings that you've had according to the open enrollment law. So he felt like he was really in a pickle having to sign that form before he knew whether he would have space. Most districts that have space, this is not an issue for them. But I'm hopeful that as we do some of the things that the legislature is trying to do to improve the economy of our state, that we'll have increased enrollments in our schools. But at any rate, he did tell an interesting story, and that is, and if you, do any of you have a military base next to your school district, your Chamber of Commerce really likes the military base and the economic benefit for that. And he said there was a previous time, not this year, where one of the commanding generals and officers at the fort wanted to have their student come to Manhattan High School and not in the district they were in on post. And he had to tell him no. And he said that did not make him a very popular superintendent and might not make you too popular with the Chamber of Commerce. So last year, when we said we had this problem, and the parents who are here today who work with the host families asked if I could help them figure out a way to get the school district to agree to do these students since they really would be in-district students. And I thought back about not this committee, but it's really great to be on Ways and Means in the Budget Committee because there's a little vehicle there called a proviso. And that proviso allows you to correct things. We were always hesitant to do a lot of provisos, and we shouldn't legislate with provisos. But thanks to Chair Bellinger and Chair Waymaster, they agreed to put a proviso in, so we were covered for this year. And their suggestion, and we met with our senators, Senator Titus and Senator Starnes, and they agreed that the best way to do this would be with a bill. So that's why we're here. And I would like to introduce a couple of other people here. I have here Nancy Bridges, and wave. She's a former teacher in the district when I was superintendent. She's the Heartland Hosting Coordinator and the Heartland School Relations Coordinator for AFS. And she and her husband have had several AFS students over the years. Robin Cole, and she's going to give testimony, but she's retired CEO and Executive Director of our Community Mental Health Center, Pawnee Mental Health. And she and her husband have hosted several of the AFS students over the years. So if there are difficult questions, I want you to direct those to those people first. And otherwise, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I'll stand for questions if you have other testimony first. But thank you, Madam Chair.
We'll handle questions as we go. So Senator, if you want to stay at the podium. I would say my recollection very much matches Senator Dietrich's. It was never intended, they were intended to be in district, so this codifies what the intention was supposed to be. Any questions for Senator Hawk? They're letting you off easy. They can be hard.
No, I think I might run again. This is, oh, wait a minute. No, I'm not.
We'll help you get house trained. And just gonna, Michelle, point out that Representative Ruiz is online. And Robin, your turn next. Thank you for being at committee today.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Estes and members of the committee. My name, again, is Robin Cole, and I'm the support coordinator for AFS Heartland area. AFS Heartland area covers the entire state of Kansas except for Kansas City. Kansas City is its own area within AFS. And as retired Senator Hawk mentioned, my family and I were host parents. We hosted 7 high school exchange students, and I was a liaison for 9 high school exchange students. I really do appreciate this opportunity to provide testimony in favor of Senate Bill 361. As has already been mentioned, the purpose of this is to address the unintended consequence of the open enrollment bill, which took effect the 24-25 school year. And as has already been explained, because exchange students are not in residence at the time that counts are being made, there's been some question about whether or not they're open to the open lottery process. Fortunately, no students at USD 383 have actually had to go through that process, and it's because of that proviso that retired Senator Hawk helped us get through last year. What has happened is that the students have been treated as though they were in resident students, like any other students in the district. So as has already been explained, this bill makes the provisions of last year's proviso permanent so that we don't have to come to the legislature every year asking for another proviso so that exchange students can be accepted into the schools. I'd like to speak just briefly to the question of what's the problem that, that is needing to be fixed. And I think just, and Nancy may be able to even explain this a little bit better than I can, but essentially when exchange students make the decision that they want to do an exchange, they can make that decision anywhere from 6 months to 18 months before they actually make their exchange. The AFS, which is the organization that we represent, starts releasing the profiles, names, information about the students around the first of the year. Sometimes we see information come out before the end of the year, but certainly in January, information starts coming out. The problem, if this bill isn't passed, is that students, exchange students, their host families, the schools, won't know until the last minute, essentially, whether or not a student is being accepted into a particular school district. And that's just not acceptable if we want to have a sustainable high school exchange program in place. The way that that works is that AFS USA, for example, makes the students who have been accepted for the programs nationally available. And that's how it first rolls out. And then they may be regionally available. And so then families and volunteer teams have the opportunity to review the profiles of these different exchange students. Those then, that information at a high level is shared with families who are interested in hosting students. The host family then selects a student that they would like to host. The school then has to accept that student into its school district. Neither now nor under the provisions of Senate Bill 361 are school districts required to take exchange students. School districts have always had and will continue to have autonomy in that area. So this bill doesn't require that school districts accept exchange students. It just allows them to accept exchange students without requiring them to go through the non-resident lottery process. So it clears things up, and I think will make things smoother moving forward. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I do also just want to say thank you to Senators Starnes and Titus for how they've helped us on the Senate side, and for retired Senator Hawk for his support of this as well. Melissa asks, what is AFS? Allied Field Services. And so AFS was a program that started after World War II. It was a program that was meant to help, and Nancy can probably speak more eloquently to this than I can, but to rehabilitate the relationship between Germany and the USA. And so it started out as German and US American students doing exchanges, and then over time it has expanded to include, I don't know how many countries. Yeah, Allied Field Services.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I assume you would like to stand for questions?
Yes, yes.
So I don't opine often, but I'm going to opine today because my mother-in-law, just off of the top of my head, I can think of 7 countries that she hosted students from, and I think the real number was probably close to a dozen. And she even went to Japan and New Zealand to see 2 of hers, and many of her other students still write to her and come to America to visit her, and it's a wonderful program. So thank you to all of you guys for what you do. Any questions for the conferee? Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just kind of a mechanics question, I guess, because I'm surely empathetic to what the problem is, how we're trying to solve it, unintended consequence, and I get all of that. And just a quick side note, my brother over in Johnson County and his family hosted several foreign exchange students over the years. But this Heartland AFS, and you said it covers the state of Kansas.
Yes.
How many schools would be involved, or how many communities are involved throughout the state of Kansas in this AFS program?
That's a great question, and it sort of leads to information outside of even the scope of your question. But in Kansas, currently, we have 15 students, so we're not even talking about a lot of students in the state of Kansas. Nancy, how many high schools are currently hosting in Kansas? So five high schools in Kansas currently are hosting, and 15 is the goal that AFS USA has established for the Heartland area for this next school year. And that's down a lot from what it was when my family was most actively involved in hosting students for lots of different reasons. But the information that question leads to is that AFS isn't the only exchange program in the state of Kansas. There are other, Rotary Youth Exchange is another example of an exchange program. There are others that I'm not as familiar with. So the impact is greater than just 15 students for next year, but it is a statewide impact. And I think it's minimal.
Thank you. Just one follow-up
Yes, you may.
question, please. So, yeah, you just opened the door to my follow-up question. So with Rotary, with AFS and all that, this bill is not specific to AFS. It's, or is it? Or
No.
is it foreign students?
You're
foreign
correct.
exchange students in general?
Yes, you're correct. This bill would apply to any foreign exchange student through any high school exchange program.
I understood it.
Yes.
I like the broad implications.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on your point, there are many other organizations. 10 years ago or so, we hosted a girl from Germany, and they had a city of Topeka. We'd get together with all the other exchange, and there was 10 or 12 in that group just in Topeka. So I don't know what the number is, but it's not huge. But it's
Any other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, this does close our testimony for today, unless there's anyone that I missed, and we will be working this bill tomorrow. So now we are going to go to our informational hearing. And Rebecca, would you like to come to the microphone? Rebecca, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here to offer the foster care report card. Two of our members were not here last session, so I just will make this statement for the benefit of our new members. Once a year, we get a report from the Department of Children and Family Services on how our foster children are faring under the school system. So it's a very targeted audience, but this is probably high up there on the list of the populations of students that need special love and care from us, and how we're doing with them. So, Rebecca, welcome to committee. You may begin.
Thank you. I see I have the report card up on the screen. I wasn't even anticipating that. Okay. Chair Estes, members of the committee, I agree with you. This is one of my favorite pieces of testimony to do every year because it is an opportunity for me to sit down with some very specific numbers and some year-over-year numbers that I don't always get to spend a lot of time with. So preparing for this testimony is one of those opportunities to really look back over the year and see, both from the data and then through inquiries to our case management providers, how are things going? The thing that it has stood out to me over the last few years, this year and last year and the year before, I think this is the third time I've presented this testimony, is that our successes come from the cooperation of staff within my agency, staff within the Department of Education, staff within our local school districts, staff within our case management providers, all of those people who have a part in the education of young people who are experiencing foster care, really sitting down at the table, having those discussions that are sometimes hard, and systems that don't always match up, to really figure out how do we do the next right thing to support these young people, both educationally and in their other well-being outcomes. During this year, a few of those places where we have seen some real successes within those collaborations is the continued co-facilitation between DCF and KSDE for the Every Student Succeeds Acts meetings. We also received some joint guidance from our federal partners on both sides of the House, so from HHS and the U.S. Department of Education, regarding our best interest determinations that occur under ESSA. So staff within DCF, staff within KSDE spent a large chunk of the year, about the first 3 quarters, really combing through that guidance, revising our own processes and procedures for best interest determination meetings, and then developing policy within our individual agencies and holding a joint convening for our local education agency foster care points of contact. That went so successfully that KSDE is hosting some additional convenings for foster care learning opportunities. We have some topics already set up, continued review of that best interest determination process, talking about some of our special programming, so our juvenile detention centers, our psychiatric residential treatment facilities and how those interact with education and foster care, how we can help increase stability through transportation, some opportunities for both sides of the house to do some feedback, to address some challenges that come up throughout the year. And then the last topic is on special education and foster care. I've included in the written testimony today about 3 vignettes, and while I won't read those to you, I think there is a theme across all of those that as we all work together in that best interest determination meeting, as we all sit down and think about what is best for the student in front of us, we're seeing successes for specific students, and in many cases, those specific successes are supporting successes as we move forward for the larger student population. It gives us an opportunity to include also some youth voice in that. We had one of the vignettes talks about a young person who we found a relative placement, which improves outcomes in the foster care system, we know, and she's like, I'll go, but I don't want to change schools. And we were able to work with the case management provider, the educational institution, to make arrangements for her to both go to the relative placement and also stay in the school that she was in. So really a success on both sides of that house. We look forward every year to kind of reviewing the data that comes out of the foster care report card. And this year, there are some highlights within that data. For all of our students in foster care, their graduation rate continues to increase. And the gap between the all-student population and the foster care student population continues to narrow.
Rebecca, I'm sorry to interrupt. We do have people who watch us online. If you're referring to something that's in a PowerPoint that Jaden has, if you could help him get on the right page so people who are viewing at home can see what you're referring to. But I'm not sure if what you're referring to is one of the graphs included in this part of your testimony.
So the graphs that are included are the Department of Education graphs, and I wasn't going to present them exactly. The analysis of those numbers is in my written testimony.
Thank you.
So when we look at our youth in foster care, we're looking at both what is their success rate and what is the gap between that group of youth who are experiencing foster care and the all-student population. When we look at the graduation rate, that gap continues to narrow. 2 years ago, in school year 22-23, we were seeing 23.6% was the difference between those two groups, and that has decreased to 19% during school year 24-25, and this is the second year in a row when the growth in graduation rate for students in foster care has outpaced the growth of our all-student population. So we continue to see that growth, and we're seeing that grow at a faster rate. For our youth in foster care, the attendance rate has remained relatively steady at about 89%, which is lower than our all-student population, but that gap is less than 5% for every group or subgroup of students. So they are relatively close together. Our rates for chronic absenteeism continue to remain steady, with a gap that is about 17%, and that gap has also remained steady. The dropout rate for students experiencing foster care continues to decrease. During the 22-23 school year, that gap was 5.1%. During school year 24-25, that gap was only 3.7%. So we're continuing to see that get much closer together. For our students being promoted to the next grade level, we continue to see that gap narrow as well. During school year 23-24, that gap was about 5%, but during 24-25, that's dropped to 2.4%, so about 50%. We continue to see more students in foster care promoted to the next grade level at every grade level, except there's an odd anomaly in second grade. We don't know what the explanation for that is right now. And that gap also continues to narrow. For our 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th graders, their rate of promotion is actually higher than the all-student population. In every grade level, except for 10th or 11th, more than 90% of students who are experiencing foster care are promoted to the next grade. Even in those 10th and 11th grade levels, that gap continues to narrow. Our 11th graders narrowed that gap by 4.2%, and the 10th graders narrowed that gap by 2.7%. The percent of our kids who are experiencing foster care who access at-risk preschool programs continues to rise year over year. About 90%, well, more than 90% of preschool-aged students in foster care access one of those programs, and that's about 16% higher than the general population. We see about 8.5% of our student-aged foster care population accessing mental health intervention team services in our school districts. During school year 24-25, there were about 81 school districts who provided that service. So we continue to see that increase year over year, even when we don't see that same increase in our general student population. Our schools and our system, our child welfare system, continue to focus on academic preparedness for post-secondary success. So that's that number of kids who score a 3 or a 4 on those state assessment tests. There is all sorts of excitement going in the hall. I feel like they're singing behind me. Both youth experiencing foster care and the all-student population have experienced increased percentages in all core subject areas. This is one place where we've not seen that gap narrow as much, which is a little challenging because those assessments capture a point in time and also capture a specific cohort of youth, so that's a little harder to diagnose. We continue to look at that with our partners at KSDE and really understand those cohorts and what might be creating some of those discrepancies. One of the places where we continue really to see opportunities for growth is when we talk about disciplinary action and time out of school that's resulting from that disciplinary action. We know that our Kansas students in foster care are experiencing increased amounts of suspensions from both 22-23 and 23-24 into the 24-25 school year. These students also experience an average number of days have experienced an increased average number of days suspended. And that trend holds true when we're also talking about out-of-school suspensions, that students in foster care are more likely to experience an out-of-school suspension than the general population, and that when they do experience that, it is for a longer period of time. We know that very few students in Kansas experience an expulsion, like 0.1% of the full population, but 0.2% of the foster care population, so about 11 students. And when our students experience an expulsion, it is nearly 16 days longer than a student in the all-student population. We continue to understand that some of that reflects the reality of the young people that we are seeing within foster care. We've spent a lot of time talking to the legislature, talking to partners about the high acuity needs of some of the young people who are entering our system. And I think those needs are reflected in those disciplinary numbers. We continue to look at what supports we can provide directly to young people, directly to families, directly to placement families, in order to support them through those behavioral outbursts. I know this is a topic that our Every Student Succeeds group has spent a considerable amount of time talking about what do we need to do differently so that our students in foster care are not experiencing those increased disciplinary actions. Again, I always look forward to the opportunity to come in and present this report to you all, and I am happy to stand for questions or to refer questions to my friends at the Department of Education.
They're used to it. I think I heard somebody call Dr. Harwood Google Harwood yesterday. So don't usually take up the whole question time, but today I'm going to take a little bit more than I usually do. Number one, I want to put the conversation you and I had before committee on the record, so to speak, and that is that last year we talked about the ability for groups like JAG-K and Sparkwheel that have a credit recovery component to them to also be able to continue contact with students who are removed by DCF or become the custody of DCF when they are moved to a school that doesn't have one of their programs, because those organizations have expressed to me that they'd love to stay as a constant in that child's life, and I think that child needs as much normal, as constructive normal as they can get. And it's, the solution to that is as simple as the department giving those organizations, and you seemed to think that that was doable. So I just wanted to get that on the record, and correct me if I'm wrong.
You are correct. Not only did you tell me, I wrote it down.
Thank you so much, because I think that's,
Don't write it down, it doesn't exist.
I hear you. I think that's one of those things that's a simple solution that could go a long way. You talked about some measurements, and when you mentioned the story of the student where you guys were able to work out the transportation issue, do you have enough examples of that where you're going to be able to compare the outcomes of the students that you're able to do things like that for versus those who are not? Because I think Chairman Getz would like that data to argue for a bill that he supports and is over in the Senate now that helps to facilitate some of that transportation.
Absolutely. So that's an excellent question. I know that one of the things we are working on is how to really track the outcomes of those best interest determination meetings. Our partners at KSDE are doing a lot of that tracking. And so I think in future years, we will have more information on the outcome of those best interest determinations as far as like what happened in the determination. What I don't know is whether or not we'll be able to track that to any specific outcome for a young person. I don't know that the numbers will be large enough that we could report them.
Okay, thank you very much. I am curious if you guys are tracking in terms of a school year, how many placements in different homes or residential settings are average for Kansas children in the custody of DCF?
We track placement stability in a couple of different ways. I don't know that any of them would correlate directly to a school year. Some of them would track directly with not a calendar year, because it would be a
fiscal year. Okay, what's that fiscal year number?
I will have to look and get back to you. I didn't bring it with me, and I don't want to make it up.
Okay, and I would love for that to be included in all future reports, as well as the answer to the next question. And are you able to track how many school placements a student has in the course of a school year would be preferable, but whatever year you're able to do that in? And I'm looking for that information, not to criticize anyone, but to understand and seek how we prioritize some potential solutions. Would you know that number or have an idea for us?
I don't have that number, and I don't know if I will have that number. I'll have to talk to our data team and see if that is a number we can get you. I know we can do physical placements, and I think we can make some assumptions from those physical placements. But as we continue to refine the best interest determination data recording, we should be able to refine some of that. I don't know that I can provide that to you this year, but we may be able to do that in future years.
Thank you. And I assume that you guys are trying to keep them in the same school when you move them around, but it's also hard to find foster families, and you're not able to do that as much as you would like to. Would that kind of track?
So I think that is an incredibly accurate, discussion. I think that the underlying assumption from Every Student Succeeds is that kids do better when they stay in their school of origin. So that is where we start, is how can we keep this young person in their school of origin? One of the ways that we try to avoid that is we have what's called a placement stability team decision-making meeting. So how can we stabilize this placement and keep this young person here? If that doesn't work, the next step would be to find that placement and see how close we can keep them to their school. And if we can keep them close to their school, we start from the assumption that they are best to stay at that school of origin. School of origin feels, it is one of those terms that feels a little weird because school of origin can change over time. So the school of origin on the date of entry to foster care would be the measuring point. As that child is placed, that new school becomes a school of origin. So we would always try to stay with that school of origin as best we can, dependent on the placement availability.
Right, and I think depending on the reasons you took a child out, you may want a child away. Not maintaining a placement of origin sometimes is important. Other questions for the conferee? Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rebecca, for being here. And I asked you a ton of questions, I think, when I saw you in K-12 this year. Would you break down who all comprises the best interest team? What does that look like? Who sits on those discussions?
So that's a great question. We are working through how do we increase that population. At a bare minimum, it has to include the school of origin, so their foster care point of contact typically, and our case management provider who is directly serving the child, because it is a best interest determination meeting. So at very least, those two people will be there. We are working with KSDE and internally to refine that policy to actually include some additional people, because we feel like there's a lot of other people who may be able to provide some of those either natural supports or at least information to help us make the best interest determination that we can.
Thank you, and thank you for your work on making sure that we are taking the students' best interest in mind. So many times they've been lost in the shuffle, and then it feels like they get lost in the shuffle and adults making these decisions for them, and I appreciate the work that you guys are putting into that.
Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of comments and a couple of questions, but they'll be very brief. I don't know what the responses will be, but no, I'm just kidding. Well, first of all, piggybacking on what the chair asked a minute ago about placements and so forth, I was looking at the attendance rate and 89%, which is pretty good and it's been steady, but does that take into account that a student has been at a school of origin and then they're no longer there or at that school? I mean, I just don't understand the attendance rate and how that's determined. Is that in your report? I haven't looked through that. I just got that today and I haven't looked through that. So if it is, I can research it.
I don't know, and I'm happy to glance. I do know that all those questions will have to go to my friends from the Department of Education because they gather that data.
And maybe my other questions will as well. Another one is just being promoted to the next grade. Is that based on all the academics and so forth? So that may be to the board as well. Graduation rate caught my attention in the first party report. And you said it's risen, which is a good thing. And then on the gap between foster care and all student, it continues to narrow. But do we know why? Do we know what factors have helped the graduation rate stay steady? Do we know what's narrowed that gap?
I think that's a great question. I don't know that I could give you an exhaustive list, but I do think one of the things that impacts that is some work that the legislature did a number of years ago that allows a student in foster care to graduate with the state minimum, even if their district requires something else. So if a student experiences instability and is in multiple districts over the course of a year, to graduate from whatever high school they are at, they have to meet the state minimum requirements as opposed to maybe whatever their district may also require that maybe they missed as a freshman. So I think that has had an impact in that it adjusts that number of credits for our young people. I think also we just have a lot more ways to make up credits now than we have had in the past. And so I think that also supports our young people being able to make up those credits, whether they're doing that maybe over a summer or doing that in some other setting and having those credits recorded with their high school.
And then my comment, Madam Chair, is with regard to absenteeism, dropout rate, and the mental health, I absolutely understand how those can all be issues with foster care and kids bouncing around if they have to, even though I know you try to do what's best for the child. But I am always interested in the data that substantiates that. You know, why are they absent? Why are they dropping out? Is it because of their instability with the foster homes, or is it some other reason? Is it due to the school setting? So that's my comment, is not necessarily a specific answer today, but the supporting documentation that tells us why we have the absenteeism, so forth. Some of it is understandable with the instability, but are there other reasons? So thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I'm going to follow up on Representative Pishney's question and then go to Representative Getz. I do recall year before last, we were talking about, I forget the name of the organization that does the credit recovery, and they're getting funded through you guys now, correct? And would that be part of why we're seeing their work is to helping with graduation rates and credit recovery?
So I think we have a couple of organizations that do that type of work. I would need to look, because you're talking about iGrad, and I would need to look at their specific funding. I know during that particular year, we did transfer that funding over to them. Kansas Kids at Gear Up, which is out of Wichita State University, has a federal grant, and I think are doing they have historically used iGrad to do that work, and I think are doing something a little different now with the same outcome. I think anybody who can help look at those transcripts, particularly when we've got multiple schools involved, and help young people understand what they have and what they need, and maybe what they need to do to recover something that they almost have, is helpful to moving kids toward graduation.
Thank you. And I will pass on some feedback that I have received from some of the juvenile judges in Sedgwick County, that they are literally having to order a more appropriate academic placement for some of the students because they're coming in at a weird time of year and classes are full and so forth, and you have a student who is in general math getting placed in high-level math classes, and that student's highly frustrated that they're yet again failing because they're inappropriately placed. And we had also had previous testimony about guidance counselors giving gentler courses in a well-intended intent to help the child transition, but I hope to hear that we're doing a better job of student placement. I won't put you on the spot with that today, but I'd love some follow-up. Representative Getz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. Thanks for being here. It's good to hear this again and not be on the hot seat of sitting in the chair. You get to think about things a little differently. So my questions kind of have to do around the time frame or like an industry standard or best practice for the right time frame for a temporary placement, and also kind of around for the health of the student, for outcomes that kind of everything that you're listing, for that help with graduation rate, that help with making up credits that they've missed. And, you know, particularly in a temporary placement where a student has to change schools and then is needing to be enrolled in a temporary way, but then also into the next step of the long-term way. Is there any industry standards that are kind of best practice timeframes for things like that?
I'm not aware of any sort of industry standards or anything within like the Child Welfare League of America accreditation guidelines or anything like that, partially because every kid is so different. And what may be true for kid number one sometimes is very untrue for kid number two. So I think those kind of industry standard best practices things are a little difficult. Our goal is to always avoid that temporary placement if we can and have that first placement be the placement, knowing that that is not always possible. But we talk a lot about the importance of that first placement with the hope that we can have that be with a relative, that we can have that be with a non-related kin, that we can have that first placement be a long-term placement. Not only does it support our young people's educational outcomes, it also supports our improvement in our placement stability outcomes. That first placement, if we have, so no matter what that placement is, so a child goes to an emergency shelter for a couple of days while we find that placement. That first placement still counts in those placement stability numbers, so we try to avoid that when we can and have the first placement be the placement.
I have one more follow-up. So
may.
then it's just, thank you, Madam Chair. Basically just, what are DCF's average temporary placement timeframes and average timeframe of enrollment time? Does it, once they get to a placement, is it normally 2 days to get enrolled? Is it that day? Is it already arranged before they get there? Is it everywhere in between? But I guess I'm kind of just, another thing to kind of track and be able to be aware of, that if it gets too big for, you know, that loss of education, and I know you're trying to do your best of, we want to get students enrolled as fast as possible. We want to have them in temporary placements for a short amount of time and then in the longer one. But those are kind of two things that I'm just trying to have a little bit of a metrics around. And I wondered if that could either be added, if it's not accessible right now, could be added to that report, as just trying to track that a little bit of how long are students in a temporary placement and how long is it taking to enroll them in school.
So I can certainly look and see if there is a possibility to add that and talk to our data folks about what they pull. I do think that number is always going to be a little weird, because when we talk about temporary placements, we may be also looking at that 72 hours before a child is placed in custody. If they were in police protective custody, then there's going to be about 72 hours, so about 3 days, where that child is not yet in our custody, so we can't even make arrangements for them for education, and they may never enter our custody. They may return home, they may be placed with somewhere else. So even the number we give you may not be as reliable as you were hoping for, because we're really going to be only able to measure from the time a child enters our custody, which doesn't mean that they haven't been in some sort of a placement for some period of time prior to that.
I appreciate that. I just think something to kind of go off of and see which direction it's trending over time would be helpful. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Chairman Getz, and then Representative Haskins. You're kind of reminding me of the conversation we had about how long it was taking cum folders to follow a student. Are we doing better? And are you being able to get students enrolled quickly enough? And I'm concerned, the concern has always been how long it takes an IEP to follow a student. How's that going?
So I think in some ways that issue is helped along by having really clear processes for best interest determination, because some of those discussions are happening in that best interest determination and then transferring to the new school if that's the determination of that meeting. I think what I can tell you is I have not heard anything recently about either one of those things, which simply means it hasn't gotten to me, and not that it hasn't been a problem for an individual student.
Okay, thank you. That's sometimes no news is good news. Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the testimony, and I apologize to the committee. It's the first time I'm looking at this data, and so I just have some questions, and it's conjectured, all right? So it's just my opinion. But I do know personally that there are school administrators, and I'm a son of a school administrator, and there are just some are overall fantastic, but there's some bad actors that try to move the troubled students to another school, to another building or grade, or just get them out of their area so they don't have to administer that. And I'm looking at the promotion of grade level, and then I'm factoring in that 36% of African-American Black students are in suspension, either in or out of school. So have you seen any type of culture or change that, man, we're really trying to advance these students to move them on, or is it just some bad actors that constituents have contacted me on?
I don't know that I have the world's best answer for you. I think you are exactly right that both things can be true at the same time, that I think our educators are trying really, really, really hard. And much like within our system, sometimes despite everyone's best efforts, you have a bad apple or two amongst the bunch. So I think that is true. I have not experienced or heard about the promotions being strictly for social purposes, or that young people in foster care are being promoted when maybe a similar all-student population peer would not have been promoted. I was talking, my sister is an educator, and I was talking to this, and she was shocked that any child, she is an educator in another state, any child was not being promoted. She was like, we don't do that here. They all get promoted. So I think it says a lot about the integrity of our system that we have both numbers in existence. Kids who are promoting when they should be promoting, and kids who maybe are not promoting because they need the additional support of another year in that grade.
And Madam Chair, one last question, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. And again, I'm not implying that foster care children are all bad apples and they need to be, please don't interpret that. It's just a general statement. It's definitely my conjecture of an observation. But has there been any research done that's tied a correlation between suspension rates and graduation preparedness or college preparedness that you know of? And if not, I can contact KSDE. But it seems like you hit on that as like they seem to have a low score as far as college readiness, preparedness compared to others. But yet there's also the suspension rate that students might be not in school enough to be prepared. I'm just asking.
I am not aware of any studies. I would kick that one to our friends at the Department of Education. I suspect that if any such thing exists, they are probably aware of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Brantley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. I'm looking at pages 11, 12, and 13 on the state assessment piece. And it looks like on the assessment scores for math, the number of foster care students that went up a level on the state assessment between 23-24 and 25-20 or 24-25. Looks like about 23 different levels had increases where students moved up. On ELA, it looks like 26 levels from all the demographics had an increase. But then when you go over to science, on page 13, there's only 5. And I'm wondering, has there been a focus on reading and math and not science, or can you help me understand that a little bit more?
So I don't know if I can help you understand that. I may defer part of that to our friends at education, but I will say I happened to be looking at state assessment testing earlier today and noticed that science testing occurs in not nearly as many grades. Mostly I was looking to see what my own kid was taking for assessment tests this year. And he happens to be an 8th grader, so we'll be taking the science assessment. But the number of grades in which that particular assessment occurs is far fewer. So that could account for some of that difference. Outside of that, I would have to look to our friends in education to talk about particular courses of study.
You may.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It looks like rather than being divided up by grade levels, they're divided by demographics. So when I was looking there at the reading or the ELA and the math, almost every level has an increase, but in science, even in the demographics, there's only 5, and that really concerns me that maybe we need to focus more on some science. I don't know if there's just a missing, I don't know. Anyway, but that would be a concern.
Thank you. And this is a KSDE document. And Gabby, would Dr. Harwood be available? Oh, he is here. Would you I don't know how a tall guy snuck into the room, but you did. Would you be available tomorrow to go through this document for us? I know I'm kind of giving you short notice on that one. All right, thank you very much, because we only have one bill to work, and I think there's a lot of great questions that are more suited, and it doesn't surprise me that we give each of you each other's questions, because it is a partnership, and I'm glad to hear you guys use that word. Any other questions, Representative Schmoy?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. This is more so big overview. How are we doing on foster families? Are we increasing? Are we decreasing? Are we staying pretty stable with the number of available placements?
So I actually just looked at that number yesterday for some information I presented in another committee. And our number over the last 2 weeks, I know it's been, I think, 2,141 homes, which does not count the number of beds. A home may be licensed for up to 4 beds. Additionally, that number so I always use the squares and rectangles, so every foster home is counted in that number. Not every foster home serves youth who are in DCF custody. So every child who is out of home is in foster care, but not every child in foster care is placed in DCF custody. So very squares and rectangles. But I think the answer is always we need more people who are willing to provide support and care to young people, whether that is as a placement or whether that is as a natural support. And we continue to work on our diligent recruitment plan to really focus that recruitment so that people understand what they are being asked to do and who they are being asked to do that for, and to make sure that they are as well prepared as they can be prior to accepting that first placement.
All right. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the conferee? Rebecca, thank you very much for being with us today and being so forthright and open with us. We appreciate it very much. Committee, yesterday I mentioned a bill above the line in the Senate. I have not heard if it passed final action yet. But please continue to assume that if a bill passes the Senate, I'm going to do my best to hear it here and prepare accordingly. So I don't know if 339 will make it to Thursday or Monday or not arrive in time at all. I just don't have a very good predictor on that. And I thank you guys for all being flexible, for your great questions and attention today, and we are adjourned.